I'm Senator Marv Hagedorn from Idaho, and I just wanted to thank the good representative and leader Longford so articulately describing why we are here. When I arrived last night, a lot of us informally got together and had dinner and drinks, and everyone was talking about how we can fix Washington with this amendment or this amendment or this change. And I think it's important that we reel ourselves back and think about the how, not the what. Today and tomorrow are about the how. We can't do a single amendment, whether any of us think that a balanced budget is the way to do it, regulatory management, whatever that is, we can't do that until we get the how done. And today and tomorrow, and the meeting in December, and the meeting after that are going to be about the how. And I would ask everyone to step back and not focus and concentrate on the what's, because we all know the what's will fix Washington, D.C., but we're not there yet. And so we've got to step back from the what's and focus on the how. And I thank you for so articulately describing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Go ahead.
Representative Townsend from Arizona. And well said, sir. And what I wanted to present to us is what we're here for, obviously, is for the convention, but my question still remains getting to the convention, having the convention called. And what we're seeing here in Arizona is the question of, does this call for the Convention of States need to be the same topic? Does it need to be word for word? And that's something that I'd like us to consider and discuss. I don't see where it says that it has to be word for word. I don't see where it says, So I would like you guys, if you would, to address that. Mm-hmm. And if we could come to a consensus on some sort of plan on, so that Congress would have to act, because I don't want to see yet another excuse as to why they're going to ignore our applications. So if you would address that, I would appreciate that.
This is a huge piece of the debate that will take place in committee, but I've got the same concerns, and I think I don't want to start the debate for the committee, but I think something that needs to be kept in mind is we have to remember that we are all independent sovereign states, and we definitely know we all have our own opinions, right? And I think that if you try and put a harness, or I'll call it a straitjacket, around those resolutions, and you say everything has to be word for word, there is no chance that a convention of the states would ever take place, because we are independent sovereign states, and that has to be, our rules have to reflect the essence of our body, and that is we cannot straitjacket ourselves. That's I don't want to get too much more into it, because we literally could talk on that for another half hour. But the committee has that. I think it's in rules. It might be in judiciary. It's one of the committees, and they will be debating that and talking about that issue. Thank you.
In just a moment, Representative. The other portion of this is this process, the Article 5 process, was put in, again, and Chris pretty ably described the historic part of it. Like all bylaw, like all constitutions and bylaws, whether it's your state, if you're a charter city, if you belong to a not-for-profit organization or corporation, there are bylaws, and there's ways to amend those, and they talk about how that does. And this is simply this portion of this operator's manual that we call the Constitution. Now, in my mind, if we do our job appropriately over the next couple of years, we're going to be able to simply have states file a resolution calling for a convention of the states, and it doesn't have to be issue specific. Now, there have been many states have passed a balanced budget amendment, and it was done because folks said, well, if you don't say what it's for, then anything can happen at the convention. Well, I don't think that's true, but I think that's why it was restricted in many ways. So ultimately, this body needs to assure all of those folks who are afraid of a runaway convention that that's not going to happen, and here's why. So, but again, I think that ends up being part of the Judiciary Committee's discussion. So, Representative?
Thank you, Representative Tammy Wilson from Alaska. And I'm going to do a follow-up, I guess, of the last question, because to me, that's the most important question. We actually passed the Convention of States, sadly, after Georgia, but we stopped our debate to pull Georgia's so that we could be as close to Georgia's as possible, because they're a fantastic state, and we wanted to be one too. But it really is, because it's a lot of work, you know, to get it passed and to get your colleagues to understand, and we don't want to get all the states and get it all, you know, that stack of paper, and then all of a sudden say, sorry, you know, you guys were too far apart from each other. So, I mean, I don't want to do a debate either. My question, Joe, really is not about what the resolution says, but how do we make sure it doesn't get thrown out? I mean, we spent over 3 hours debating and putting in women's rights, and there's a fun one as a woman to talk against it, you know, gun rights being added, and a whole lot of different things, and we just kept going back to the one that had already been passed that we wanted to keep as close, because it was my understanding that because Congress doesn't want to do what we want them to do anyway, is you have all these piles of papers, and you know, this one matches this one matches this, and at the end of the day, I don't want to have 35 states all in their own little individual pile, and Congress coming back and saying, good try, states, we're not going to do it, because this is great that we're doing this step, but what's really going to scare Congress is that they realize that we all can get along as states, and we really do, and we're tired of what they're doing to us. So to me, that, you know, we can't really do anything else until we really understand, because if that is true, then we all need to start matching. We need to get them passed, because we need to send the message to them that we're going to start doing it ourselves if they can't get their act together.
Make a comment right here. I want to go back to Representative Lemunion's question, and something to think about. So his question was, let's say we get everything called, we come into a convention, and there's a set of rules with a continuity clause, it takes place, and all of a sudden everything, let's say they just basically gut it and write a whole new set of rules at the convention. So that was his concern, and what we can do in that situation is, if you, in your resolution, you could say, we are sending our delegates based on the rules that exist at this point. If there is a change in these rules, in order for the authority to stay with this delegate, the legislature of Wisconsin has to approve that within 48 hours, or that delegate loses their authority. So that's a clause you can put in your delegate or in your resolution, so that binds your delegate to a set of rules. But the legal problem you get into here as well, can a separate legislative body denote what the rules are at a different legislative body? And I think that's where we get into a quagmire we don't want to get into. I think that's going to cause problems. So if we put this process into place through resolution and say, you can go, if the rules change, we need to make sure we approve it. If we don't approve it within 48 hours, you lose your authority as a delegate. Now, you have to keep going. The next step is, that means the convention itself has to make sure that we recognize in our rules the ability for the state to do that. Okay? That's a very important piece. And we have to always think through that part of it. Well, okay, we've got the states here, but we've got the convention. That convention body has to say, we're going to recognize the recall rules that a state put in place for their delegate. Because if that body does not recognize that, that's going to start causing some problems, and we want to stay away from as many problems as we can. So that's something that will be, again, specifically debated in committee and discussed.
Arizona State Senator Kelly Ward. I know that everyone here in this room believes that we have a problem in Washington, and I believe many of our constituents feel the same way. I think that one of the things I'd like to see the Communication Committee address is, how do we address the lack of trust in our elected officials, in all of us and people at the federal level and even at the local level as well. How are we going to address that lack of trust? How are we going to expect people to put faith in what we're going to do when they have such a lack of faith? And so I'd just like to see if the executive committee has any answers to that, or if there's a plan to address that in the communication committee. Thanks.
Chris wasn't paying attention.
Oh, sorry. How do we address the lack of trust issue that people who elected us and who elect all of us to be their representation? That's probably the most common email that I get, or communication that I get from my constituents, is they don't trust us to do the right thing, and that's why they worry there's going to be a runaway convention, because they feel like there's lawlessness going on already. Even if it's against the law for a delegate to go against what the rules are, they don't trust that that law is going to be enforced, as they see things that are happening at the federal level, especially where our laws are selectively enforced. How do we instill that trust in the people who need to have that before we go forward with this process?